Joining us now, Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director at the National Security Institute. Great to have you here again, Jamil. How nervous do you think Mr. Zelensky is about a Trump presidency, given what he and his vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, have both said about funding to Ukraine?
Look, I think there's no doubt that the Ukrainians and President Zelensky in particular are going to be nervous about any new president, in part because they're not sure whether they're going to see the same level of support they've gotten from this administration, which, to be fair, has been middling and not great, or they're going to get more, they're going to get less. President Trump and Vice President, nominee Vance have indicated that they would likely cut funding to Ukraine in an effort to force a settlement. The problem, of course, is how do you get to a settlement if Ukraine is losing, a settlement that the U.S. or Ukraine would want? And I think that's the fundamental challenge we face.
Jamil, I just want to play a little bit of a clip from President Trump when he was talking about foreign policy and a pretty bold promise he made. Here's President Trump from his speech.
I will end every single international crisis that the current administration has created, including the horrible war with Russia and Ukraine, which would have never happened if I was president, and the war caused by the attack on Israel, which would have never happened if I was president. Iran was broke. Iran had no money. Now Iran has $250 billion.
I will end every single international crisis, he said. Jamil, I believe at one point in the speech, he also said, I can end a bunch of these with just one phone call. That's a pretty bold statement.
Well, Jonathan, President Trump is prone to these bold statements. We were told Mexico was going to pay for the border wall, too. That obviously didn't happen. But President Trump is making a point. He's saying, look, I'm going to handle the world differently than President Biden. President Biden has gotten us into all sorts of trouble, including the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the situation in Ukraine. Look, I think what President Trump is trying to say is you either have to decide you're going to win or you decide you're not going to fight. And the problem with Ukraine is we decided we want to be in, but not fully. And so if we're going to be in Ukraine, we've got to give them everything it takes to fight. Now, President Trump may or may not do that because of his views on Ukraine. But at the end of the day, I think that's a sensible philosophy in the sense that you got to press forward. You got to be aggressive. And this administration just has not been that in any of the international realms it's pushed forward to.
But do you see President Trump's policy, if and when he gets back into the White House, as being pushing for a settlement between Ukraine and Russia that gives Russia part of Ukraine? In other words, rewards them in some way for the war that they started?
Well, Jonathan, it does feel that way. It does feel like if you're going to try to end this war in one day, or President Trump has even said he's going to end it before he even gets into office, I do think that would require him and the United States working with Ukraine to force Ukraine to make concessions about that eastern territory. The problem with doing that with a person like Vladimir Putin, though, it's just like what President Obama did in Crimea. It would be giving him something for bad action. Allow that to happen. It's just going to end up in more war like it did in the case of Ukraine. And it'll end up with ultimately a long-term invasion down the road of Kyiv and probably President Putin going further. That's the problem. You can't concede to these kind of people. It's a real issue. And President Trump's going to have to grapple with that if he's in office, because simply giving away part of eastern Ukraine to Russia could be hugely problematic in the long run.
Yeah. Jamil Jaffer, always great to have you. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good night. President
Thanks, Jonathan.
Biden is